4 days. That's the entire gap between the loudest Buenos Aires has sounded in years and the quietest Lionel Messi has ever walked off a football pitch. On July 15th, Argentina beat England 2-1 in a World Cup semifinal, and the country lost its mind. Fans climbed traffic signals around the obelisk. Someone unfurled a banner of a man who has been dead for 6 years. Strangers who had never met stood under a mural of Messi's own face and cried like they'd personally been on the pitch. On July 19th, 4 days later, in the actual World Cup final, Argentina lost to Spain in extra time, 1-0, and there was no traffic signal climbed that night. There was a team that skipped its own press conference, players grabbing opponents by the throat while Spain was still celebrating, and Messi, 39 years old and playing what almost everyone assumes was his last World Cup, standing off to the side with his hands on his hips, saying nothing. Same players, same shirt, same tournament, 96 hours apart, and by almost every measure that actually matters to the people who lived through both nights, the wrong game got remembered as the final. That's the puzzle this video is built around, and it isn't really a football question. Countries lose finals every 4 years. Normally, the loss is the one that stings longest because it's the one with the trophy attached. Argentina didn't behave like that. If you track the emotional temperature of this country for one single week in July, not the scoreline, the actual feeling on the ground, it peaked on the 15th and never came close again on the 19th. Trophy or no trophy. Something about beating England did work that beating Spain, or losing to Spain, simply couldn't touch. To understand what that something is, you have to go back further than this tournament, because Argentina and England have been having the same argument, in different clothes, for 60 years. This channel has already told the first chapter in full, Wembley, 1966. Antonio Ratin sent off in a quarterfinal nobody on the pitch could fully translate, and England's manager calling his opponents animals afterward, a word that never really left. We're not retelling it today. What matters here is only the residue it left behind. The first time this fixture ever felt personal, and it wasn't really about a tackle. 16 years later, it stopped being a metaphor. In 1982, Argentina and Britain fought an actual war over the Falkland Islands, and roughly 650 Argentine soldiers, most of them teenage conscripts, didn't come home from it. This is the part worth saying plainly, because it's the whole engine of everything that follows. For most rivalries, football is just football. For this one, football became the only room left where Argentina was ever allowed to win the argument back. That's the pattern this entire channel keeps circling. A sport standing in for a conflict neither country can finish anywhere else. 4 years after the war, on the same World Cup stage, Diego Maradona gave Argentina that room. 2 goals against England in the 1986 quarterfinal. One a handball he called, without apology, the hand of God. The other still argued over as the greatest solo goal the sport has produced. His biographer Jimmy Burns has written that Maradona experienced that match as something closer to settling a debt than winning a game. We've covered that day in full elsewhere on this channel too. What matters for this video is simpler. It's the reason a football match against England has never, since 1986, been just a football match for this country. Then 1998 and 2002, David Beckham sent off against Argentina at 19, hated at home for 2 years over it, then scoring the penalty that beat the same opponent 4 years later in Japan, on his way to becoming, decades on, the man who now technically employs Lionel Messi at Inter Miami. Small chapter, strange footnote, same rivalry. By the time Argentina and England walked out under the lights in Atlanta this July, neither team was carrying 90 minutes of history. They were carrying 60 years of it. So here's what actually happened on the pitch. Briefly, because this part the channel hasn't told yet. England led for most of the night. Anthony Gordon's goal just after the hour looked, for a long stretch, like it might be enough to finally close this out on England's terms for once. Then, with the clock running down, Argentina found 2 goals in 5 minutes. Enzo Fernandez first in the 85th. Then a substitute, Lautaro Martinez, on for barely a few minutes, scoring the winner deep into stoppage time. Messi set up both of them without scoring either himself. At 39 years old, still the one thing that hadn't changed about this rivalry in 20 years. What happened in Buenos Aires afterward wasn't really a celebration. It was a release. People climbed onto bus shelters and traffic signals around the obelisk because the sidewalks had already run out of room. A Maradona banner appeared in the crowd within the hour, like the country needed him back for this one specifically. None of it, if you'd asked anyone in that crowd, was really about reaching a final. It was about the other team. 4 days later in New Jersey, Spain beat Argentina 1-0 in extra time. Ferran Torres scoring in the 105th minute, and the response was almost the opposite of everything the obelisk had just shown the world. Leandro Paredes grabbed an opponent by the throat before the final whistle had finished ringing. Most of the squad turned its back during Spain's trophy lift. The team skipped its press conference entirely. An Argentine fan later collected over 82,000 signatures on a petition claiming the referee had been bought. None of that reads like a team mourning a loss. It reads like a team that had already spent everything it had 4 nights earlier and had nothing left to lose gracefully with. Here's the detail that makes the contrast sharper than it should be. Argentina and Spain barely have a football rivalry at all. A handful of friendlies. No scoreline either country still argues about. None of the 60 years England carries into every meeting. This channel has told the deeper story separately. The colonial history between Argentina and Spain. San Martin and the Andes crossing. A language and an identity that outlasted an empire. That history is real, and it's old. And it's arguably heavier than anything England ever did to Argentina. But it doesn't live inside a football stadium the way 1966 and 1982 and 1986 do. Nobody in that obelisk crowd on July 15th was thinking about the 19th century. On July 19th, there was no equivalent debt to collect, so losing the final just felt like losing, which, it turns out, is a much smaller feeling than the one England had already given this country 4 days earlier. There's research that explains exactly why a rival and an opponent aren't the same threat to a fan base's nervous system, even when both are standing on the same pitch. Sports psychologist Daniel Wann, who has spent decades studying fan identity, has found that when a team plays an opponent it's built a genuine rivalry history with, fans process the result less like a game outcome and more like a referendum on who they are. The emotional stakes stop tracking the sporting stakes almost entirely. Beating a true rival can register as a bigger event than winning a trophy against a stranger because the brain isn't scoring the match. It's scoring the relationship. There's an older piece of research that explains the other half of it. Why the finals loss faded so fast instead of lingering. In 1976, psychologist Robert Cialdini ran a study that's since become famous in sports psychology. After a win, students were far more likely to wear their university's colors and say, "We won." After a loss, the same students distanced themselves. They lost, not we. Winning gets claimed. Losing gets pushed away, fast, because holding on to it costs something. Argentina couldn't fully do that after July 19th. The loss was too public, too immediate, which is exactly why it came out as anger and turned backs instead of grief. But psychologically, the country had already claimed its win 4 days earlier, and a claimed win is far stickier than a disowned loss. Argentine football has its own word for this, and it didn't need an American psychology lab to name it first. Jorge Valdano, who won the World Cup with Argentina in 1986 and spent the decade since becoming the country's closest thing to a football philosopher, has spent years arguing that Argentina doesn't just play matches, it tells itself a story through them. One where every result gets folded into a larger narrative about who the country is and who's trying to keep it down. Beating England fits that story perfectly. It always has. Losing to Spain, a country Argentina doesn't need to prove anything to on a football pitch, simply doesn't fit anywhere in it. And here's the part almost nobody said out loud that week, because the football calendar and the country's actual emotional calendar had quietly stopped matching. FIFA, the broadcasters, every graphic on every channel called July 19th the biggest night of the tournament. It had the trophy, the extra time, the 22 players who'd remember it forever. But if you're tracing football as a stand-in for the arguments a country can't finish anywhere else, the real accounting had already happened on the 15th. In a stadium in Atlanta, against the one opponent this fixture was always actually about. The final just told Argentina who was the better team that day. The semifinal told them something the scoreline never could. Notice, too, what didn't happen on the English side of this. England lost a World Cup semifinal in the final 5 minutes on 2 devastating late goals, and by every account, the country mourned it like a normal, painful football result. Bad night, hard result, next tournament. There was no equivalent eruption of grief, no turned backs, no petitions. For England, this fixture carries history, but it doesn't carry the same singular weight it carries for Argentina, because England has other rivals doing that emotional work too, against Germany especially. Argentina isn't the only room where England goes to argue about itself. For Argentina, in July 2026, there was only ever the one room that counted, which leaves a genuinely uncomfortable question sitting underneath all of it. Messi is 39. Almost every outlet covering that final called it his last World Cup. Maradona has been gone since 2020. The two men who turned beating England into the closest thing this country has to a national holiday are either retiring or already 6 years in the ground. At some point, probably soon, Argentina will play England again in a tournament that matters, with neither man on the pitch and neither man alive to watch it from the stands. It's worth asking whether the reaction on that night will look anything like July 15th, or whether some of what erupted around that obelisk needed those two specific men to still be part of the story to mean what it meant. 4 days. That's still the whole gap. A country that climbed traffic signals for a semifinal and skipped its own press conference after a final isn't confused about which result mattered more, whatever the trophy says. It never really was about the score on July 19th. It was about which opponent Argentina had spent 60 years waiting to beat one more time. And once that account was settled, on July 15th in Atlanta, everything that came after was always going to feel, to the people who lived it, like the epilogue.